Welcome to Sivako, the road to Avatar. My name is Shaun Alexander, and I will be your guide to the world of Pandora and beyond. And today I am joined with a very special guest. The special guest is Albert from the Avatar podcast, and you'll be able to hear our conversation coming up right now. Well, I think best place to start. I always ask a couple little questions. They're super easy. First of which
Mm.
is, when did you first watch Avatar?
In 2009, I had an ear infection in Toowoomba. I had just come off of a horrible relationship, got, all that infidelity stuff, not nice, not a nice lady. Be careful, boys and girls, everybody. Make sure you are with the right one. And um, it ended up being a very healing experience. I still had, obviously, crazy ear infection as I went out of the cinema. It's not like it cured every ailment I ever had, but needless to say, I had followed the production all throughout this very awful relationship, and it was a bit of an anchor for me. Without going into the drama of it, I suppose, but first relationship ever it was for me, and I didn't have a wit about me about when to call it quits, and the person was like constantly taking advantage of like me trying to be like kind and sort of trying to maneuver around their dysfunctions and stuff. Obviously my whole policy is my my floor of being is just I want everyone to get along and everyone to sort of wish each other well and stuff. But with all of that, this escapism, Sean, which I'm sure everybody encountered when they started first hearing of this completely alien, completely CG world. Imagine the allure for someone in a pretty unpleasant, I guess, relationship kind of state, to sort of start feeling called, to such a endeavor. And then we would hear, Sean, you remember the reports of people watching it and having dreams, of the film. And this was some of the earliest, that's it, we've cracked it. It's photoreal. You can't actually tell between reality and this film. And I sort of got all wrapped up in that. And believe it or not, the film was a bit of a steadying force during that whole breakup stuff, all that heaviness, and it actually inspired me to kind of heal through creativity. I was doing my patterns, which out of nowhere completely synced up with the fact that the Navi have patterns all over them, and I designed these tattoos that mimic this biomimicry going on. There's a process in nature called morphogenesis, which is how certain patterns form across different contexts, visually and across the animal and plant kingdoms. And all of that was completely interwoven with the Na'vi, with their integration with nature and all that. And even before all this, I had had an accident in the army where I was left out on a firing range without a high vis vest or hearing protection or a bulletproof vest. Lots of, you know, not the best workplace management, a little bit of negligence there, and back in 2007. So that was super early on, but that's in the earliest stages of you were hearing James Cameron doing some of this stuff. Then I started hearing, Sean, about this story being about, what is it? An ex-marine, an ex-army person. And I'm like, but I'm an ex-army person, and I'm going through this rough time of trying to figure out who I am, and that's exactly where Jake is. And so there was an instant sort of life meets art meets life bond that was made. And obviously, I mean, I completely forgot for like two and a however long the film is that I had this crazy bad ear infection, and I just watched. I think I was taking painkillers at the time, so it was pretty trippy the first time. But yeah, sorry to take you all on a bit of a word salad mind journey there. Um, but yeah, that was my first experience with the film at the cinemas.
You know what? That's so fascinating to hear that you sort of like relate to Jake in that way, especially being
Mm,
like ex-military.
yeah.
I'm assuming, yeah, like obviously, like messages in the film then really like sort of resonate with you as well.
It was trippy. I actually got a bit spooked. It's like this is linking up on so many direct parallel levels for me that I didn't even have to make that many leaps between myself and Jake. He even has like his sleeve ends right where mine does, with that very distinctive kind of downward spike. I mean, I designed mine and it's a bit more organic. He has a bit more of a sort of, I would say, maybe 2000s ish, you know, not typical, but just I guess you could say more templatey kind of tattoo there. But it was trippy, and I definitely took notice of the similarity. And the big obvious one is that Sam and I are both Australian, and it was just insane the amount of. And I also think of Ray, my fiance, as totally Neytiri. She has Neytiri vibes every which way, coming out of everywhere. So, and we're very excited for the film, definitely.
Oh, amazing. Have you got like a favorite scene from the film?
I do. And the reason I kind of I pause with it is because it was very deeply affecting for me. Is It's taken on more meaning actually with the way of water. Um, is Grace's true passage into the Eye of Ewa.
Mm,
Um, it's because my mum-in-law passed in February this year, and we were really wanting her to come through, Sean. You know,
mm,
and it was very much the same. We just were gathered around her saying, take her back, let her come back. And they had different plans. And I had always felt a kinship with that particular scene, but then especially after what happened in February, yeah, it's taken on a whole new meaning. However, the thing that's definitely gonna have Ray and I, especially kind of, I think, pretty openly bawling is gonna be Kiri. It's gonna be this sense of her having heard Grace and having heard Jake, but in a different way. And next time when you and I see that scene of Moat saying, "Bring her to us, like let her walk amongst us again," and we're going to be thinking of Kiri. We're going to be thinking about that reincarnation, whatever it ends up being, and we like to think that the ones we love reincarnate somewhere and come back to us in some way, or are still with us, and it's very powerful, that scene, and the idea of, I guess, to extrapolate it out just beyond my own personal circumstances, is many of us wish we could go to a place like Avatar's, Pandora, like that actual planet, and then we try and we dream of it, and then we recognize we're still in our bodies, with the dying mother, which is, Grace. You can draw parallels with her and Earth, and smoking and everything, but well intentioned but full of smoke. That's planet Earth, and that's Grace. And we can feel that. I don't know if they've given it a syndrome name yet. This Paris syndrome, I think, is one, but Pandora syndrome was people really wishing they could be there, and Grace wanted that too. But especially with the films going forward, that idea of we can actually make that happen. Like, I think there's going to be a bit of a fulfillment of going back, which I posted about this morning, about that return to mother, return to water, return home.
mm. So I wanted to ask you, how did you first get started with wanting to do like your Avatar podcast? Like, what was the when was it, and like how did you think, man, this is what I feel like is perfect now?
Okay, well, that goes all the way back to 2018. Podcasting for me started in 2015. I was doing a specific kind of work where a bit of repetitive sort of movements there. I think I was printing documents, and collating and laminating or whatever. So it was a bit of a meditative job, let's put it that way. And inevitably, we were on the road to a few different films at the time, Force Awakens and Jurassic World, I guess. And I heard of these, people doing podcasts, and I had dabbled in them. Um, and then this kind of funny stuff came up. This Kevin Smith stuff came to my attention, and it sort of trickled into my, uh, you know, my, calculating of what I could devote time to, what I could see myself trying my hand at. That I think the thing that really burst through was something. I think Kevin Smith said it. It was like everything's content to someone. So huge barrier for a lot of people is like, people wouldn't want to listen to me. It's like, you very fortunately, in the cosmic sense, are never allowed to determine whether or not your stuff is good. That's for other people to determine. All you need to worry about is putting it out there as this way to channel how you sort of organically feel. And when you're on my show, I'm going to get your story, which I'm very curious about, with Sivako. But for me, it started with Yeah, I think there was a Bloodborne was coming out in 2015, and I think that was the very first time I picked up my phone and like recorded a "Hi, I love Bloodborne. I'm gonna try podcast" kind of thing. Um, and but then I started realizing that however anti-algorithmic it would be, is I have you know inescapably varied interests, and I have chosen a path which you can probably see with when you're going to jump on the podcast like later in the year. Definitely is all of the audio feeds exist separately, but what I'm building up to saying basically is, yeah, it's the Topic Podcast Network was finally the name I gave it, and it allows me to, yeah, insert any topic is to speak about it. But what happens there is a natural process of things coming to the surface at a certain level of intensity. Like one's true passions are revealed when you're given sort of that carte blanche. And this is reflected in the Avatar podcast being the Topic Podcast Network's most, uh, you know, I guess you could say successful in terms of how many people finding it on a daily basis and enjoying the show. And I think that's a direct reflection of my certainly passion for it. I'm not sure if I told you my avatar theory, which is the idea that Avatar represents a cross section of so many established stories. Like it has the bow and arrow play of Lord of the Rings. It has some of that sci-fi stuff and mythical storytelling of Star Wars. It even has the blue inhabitants with the ponytails and the blue skin, of Oddworld. Nature
Mm.
versus industrialism. It has the hard techiness of Alien and maybe a bit of Halo, I guess you could say. Um, the floating mountains of Magic the Gathering. Like it just has this quality of being the be all end all, and being someone who absolutely loves, you know, eclecticism and being able to tell many stories of different kinds. And also, first and foremost, even though I just love these fictional universes, I love nature, and Jim clearly does too with his fascination with like the actual biology, like making these things, even these crab suits, like making them feel feasible. Like he's so passionate about making these things feel like you could just turn a corner and come across an ikran or a tsurak, like thinking through every layer of the speculative biology, and making that all make sense from a physics point of view, from a feasibility point of view. A- Avatar speaks to me the most of any of the topics that I explore, and that includes Lord of the Rings, and includes Star Wars, and that's a big thing to say because I'm a Star Wars kid, grew up on those VHSs, and all of that sort of eclecticism and be all end all quality then dovetails with my passion for the environment, passion for raising awareness for some of the very real and pressing issues of the planet. And you've got yourself, Sean, like the ultimate, vessel and expression platform and conduit for worthwhile storytelling, responsible storytelling, and then having, as Jim would probably say, like a crap ton of fun with a lot of cool stuff, like cool weapons. Yeah, I love how Jim is very free to be like, yeah, this is cool. He'll think out all of the, coming up with the, what is it, Ichthyoptera? Like that's the beautiful Latin name of these tsurak, like skim wings. Oh, so beautiful. But then he's like, yeah, but they look cool too. I'm like, yes, Jim, of course they do. So another word salad to say. First podcast for the Avatar podcast was 2018. I was in Budapest at the time, and I said, it can't wait. We have 2 more years, and I'm starting a countdown, 889 days. And I started the Instagram, was the first, early incarnation of that particular feed, which now has it's the flagship for Topic Podcast, and it's the flagship for me personally on the art and entertainment side. So it's been a long time, and if you go on that highlight on Instagram, I feel free to. I think they cap you at 100 posts that you can include in a single highlight. So I'm constantly replacing the old ones, but it does go all the way back to like the 976 days, and so I've been following it for a while, Sean. And I leave it to you if that was a waste of time or not.
No, no, it's so fascinating because,
Mm,
yeah, like everyone kind of has their own story, especially with how they've got into this space, like all the content
mm,
creators. And it's really interesting to hear how different that is. And you've been speaking to a lot of the other Avatar creators, but also like people involved in the production more as well, which
Yeah,
which
Garrett.
I found so fascinating. Yeah, Garrett, that interview, he is a fascinating guy, right?
He's rad.
He's so
Yeah.
interesting.
He
I know you spoke with the person who did the fonts as well for
That's
Avatar.
right, yeah. John Rochelle, aka Swell Type, he was uh, the guy that had the I would say unenviable, but I think if I were handed that task of you know, like smiling slightly, but then getting to sort of rolling up the sleeves and getting to work in the aftermath of that papyrus sketch from SNL. Like, it's so fun, and I think you need to be able if you're secure in your fandom for something, you never get too heavy about it. I love papyrus, and when we do get um, Ryan Gosling on the Blade Runner podcast at some point, I will definitely be talking to him about that. I think he looks like he had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, that font needed updating, and that's John. So I think it's episode 3 for the Avatar podcast. If you want to check that out with him, and but I'm going to quickly take a sidebar to say, folks, Sean is coming with me to a bunch of stuff. It's a bit early to divulge, but it's certainly a case where all my opportunities are yours, and the other Avatar homies, and the extended Avatar community too, because life's too short to gatekeep or to sort of hoard opportunities. So the second anything big like that happens again, I've cracked StreamYard now, and I'm going to be bringing you along with me, including, say it with me, Wellington premiere. Definitely going to happen.
Oh,
I'm going to
oh,
just put that out. All right.
that's
I'm just going to
exciting
say that.
stuff.
All right. Okay. Go ahead, mate.
You know what? I was actually, I think what you said about gatekeeping is so interesting as well, because the idea of the RDA is really interesting when you consider it about like gatekeeping in fandom as well, because
Mm.
they're like hoarding resources which,
Ha
for
ha
everyone to
ha.
share. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really interesting way to look at it. And obviously, the RDA is like the opposite of what Avatar is trying to
Yeah.
really teach us.
Yes. So I guess it's I in psychology they call it abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. Um
Mm.
my and I've gotten impassioned about it, and it's landed me in trouble, for which I apologize if I've ever offended anyone, but or said strong words. It's obviously my the pendulum for me always returns to that position of I love you guys, and I am sorry if I've ever offended or made anyone feel bad. But the core of it for me is abundance, because uh, that's where I've always operated from, and I've even had a bit of issues with trying to be more inclusive in the community, but then people saying, let's try and hem it down just to the sci-fi, just to the escapism, where I had in previous, in a previous life, I'd wanted to include that discussion into spirituality, into even social issues like the Black Lives Matter. Like I wanted to galvanize community in the avatar space for that too, because it was a no brainer for me that we need to all recognize we're all one of the people, and I don't care if there's eye rolls or people sort of snickering to that. I think all of art and entertainment, especially of this level of artivism, has a responsibility to use its platform to spread that out. But and to use that to signal boost worthwhile voices, and for me that is also congruent with not being exclusivity minded or exclusionary. It's like I think discussions always benefit from how wide ranging they can be and eclectic they can be, which, for better or worse, that's why I I've always just said, look, I'll just call it the topic podcast, and then people might come and say, I guess he's talking a bit more about the humanity side than the in-depth lore side of things. But we have all forms, it's a big world out there, Sean. We can find all the answers we're looking for. Basil is one of the best content creators. Avatar Theory, with some of that, deja blue, we will step on you analysis that he's doing over there with the newly revealed patch and stuff. Like, I'm always for lore and uh, the in-depth sci-fi techie stuff, but I guess we each have our natural pace. I would say yours is you're very egalitarian. You really like to enter a chilled out, accepting and conversational space with people, and I think that's your forte in this space, man, for sure.
Yeah, I see
Mm.
myself as like, like a talk show host. I just like
Yeah, you are.
throw out the questions there. I love just hearing people talk. And I think that really helps as well because it means when I'm recording and editing, I don't have to listen to my voice as much. um, but I think what it is as well is that because I'm coming into the Avatar fandom from the film side of things. I'm a film student and my love for Avatar has like grown over the years, and I think that's why I kind of bring a different look to those, like as you said, Avatar theory, Avatar, like discovering Pandora, and Avatar guy who are more I would say lore driven and in world based information, whereas mine is I would say is maybe more looking at it more in terms of what is Avatar in terms of where it sits within the film industry and within Hollywood.
I think then that maybe aligns us on a certain level, vibe wise. Maybe that's probably why the pod gods put us together on this show today, because I also approach it from that point of view. We also have the Dune podcast that I do, and that is another project which it's no coincidence that Denny and Jim had a conversation recently. I think it was Vanity Fair or something where they kind of compared each other's endeavors. And, each of these people are curious about ecology, curious about spirituality, but they are filmmakers. And my, I guess I would say the thing that I lead from is, I mean, it's inescapably the real world, because the real world is where change can be made, and where this artistry actually takes place. And it's probably why, we just had Bridie Sisson, who plays the Dweller on the Lord of the Rings podcast, the shaved head lady from the Lord of the Rings on Prime, Rings of Power. And in our conversation, we talked about not just the character and the lore, and we speculated on Rune and all this in-depth stuff, but then we kind of leveled back out and talked about how the character and her portrayal of it actually helped her as a person. Like, she's like, I was lacking a lot of these qualities in my life that this character actually embodied. I was unsure of myself, and this character is absolutely unwavering, like frighteningly so, but she had this presence and assurance to her. And it's like I actually metabolized that assurance from the character and was able to start living that way a bit more because I had portrayed her. And I love that intersection of the real world and the filmmaking side. And I think it speaks to you, and it's a credit to you, Sean, that you've chosen this show to kind of explore that frontier as well, because it is fascinating to see how art can feed into life and vice versa. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think as well, as you mentioned, like James Cameron, he is a fascinating filmmaker as well. Not just his work with Avatar, but just in the industry in general, and beyond, with the work he does with documentaries, with conservation and deep sea exploration, and it's overall his just like the package he offers as a filmmaker, as a subject, is so interesting to me, which is why I felt like I don't want to just limit it just to Avatar. I want to be able to explore, his previous work. I want to look at his documentaries in the future, and I want to look at what more he's done to affect the film industry, because he is one of those filmmakers who has made a bigger impact in a, it's his quality over quantity is huge. He hasn't made a lot of films, but each one of them has had such an impact.
Yeah, he's a creator who absolutely has always one foot grounded in the real world, with even his sustainable farming endeavor as well, with Cameron Farms and stuff. And his work with NASA and deep sea submersibles and conservation. And yeah, that those are the creators that I think of that abundance mind. It's like, um, you can do more than just the creativity aspect. You can have that spill out, and I think it's taking the form literally of the subject matter of Avatar, which Way of Water is very much looking like it's going to be, very much airing out. Is talking about the path forward with our oceans in particular, and subsequent films basically confirm that they'll discuss conservation in terms of other biomes as well. But that recent, Keep Our Oceans Amazing initiative, beautiful, that they released recently, that wonderful featurette, definitely speaks to how they're concurrent. He sees the real world and our our Pandora on Earth as his partner in this, not something to sort of turn the other way from, but to actually bring along with him and um, use Pandora to kind of highlight what we have here. And I am hoping, especially because we're right next door to them, the amazing Aotearoa, like Maori culture. I'm so looking forward to people seeing the Met Kaina and immediately wanting to, jump on a plane and visit and go to the Auckland Museum and learn about where some of the primary source of these tattoos and this storytelling, which we saw in the book, has revealed some of the Met Kaina's beliefs with Uturu, like welcoming strangers in need, and the the relationship with whales, which the Maori also have a kinship with. And we have preliminarily plans in place of bringing some Indigenous elders onto the Avatar podcast to talk about that. I call it primary source, which is the stuff that went on to inspire Jim. Um, and yeah, look, honestly, Sean, if you were to pick any subject to do a podcast for, um, and as well as you're doing it, it's definitely this universe. I think you're going to be not only in demand but very busy in the coming years with this podcast, man.
That what, and before I made the podcast, I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, you know what, we got the new film coming out at the end of the year. I was really looking forward to it, and I was thinking, this podcast be a nice run up, which is why it's called Road to Avatar.
Hmm.
But now I'm thinking, like being in this and doing this for so many months now, I'm thinking, yeah, there's no way I can't not continue it on. It's gonna
You
have to
have
continue
to,
because it's so
yeah.
rich and there's so many subjects to talk about. Because no matter what, there's always someone else who has a different view, who can bring a different aspect of that story to life in a different way. So I can hear a different opinion. And I love that you're bringing in people from different cultures as well to speak about it and how that relates to the film or to the inspirations that Jim took as well.
Mm, absolutely, and I am doing my best with this StreamYard format of actually reaching out to people. Generally on Instagram is where I've sort of found my footing. It's less to do with the meta stuff or whatever. It's more because I'm an artist and designer, and I just like how it's sort of visuals first, and I love my layout, and I quite like the square shape that works for me. But on episode 22, we have this amazing TikTok creator. Her name is Exopaxon, which is an amazing name. Exopaxon, like, and she'll be joining us to dive into her angle. And I, not just from other cultures, but other spheres where I'm admittedly a little bit underdeveloped. Like, still haven't cracked into TikTok, so she can maybe help us with that. But yeah, that's a whole other subject, mate. If you got me going on how much hope I have in my heart, knowing that these young people, oh my gosh, Bailey Bass, Trinity Bliss, Jamie Flatters, Jack Champion, Dwayne Evans, Philip Geljo. I think that's everyone, and Brighton Dalton. Nailed it. So and it's so great to see these young people, like, in still their formative kind of life stage, at the center of something so, you know, um, that has such a clear message of preservation and of and conservation of the planet, and which always feeds into ourselves, because we're not separate from nature. And what a great beautiful, like, to have something embedded in the triple, quadruple, quintuple A of pop culture and this art and entertainment platform, which film is still massive. I think they're obviously going to take over. I'm going to say this straight to the UB massive people listening, which you should be if you're not, and I'll chase you up if you're not. You have to be listening to Sivako. I always self-elect myself as people's, like, campaign manager, just trying to push the podcast out. Now you should pause the episode and review Sean's 5 stars on iTunes. Definitely do that wherever you can find the podcast. But Frontiers of Pandora is also going to be massive, I think, with something which you and I are gonna definitely have a dedicated episode about, which is the absolute parallels to the interactive medium which Avatar evokes. I mean, you're talking about a story premise where you're lying down and you're jacking into another world and operating an avatar, which is what the central conceit of a video game is. So I think that also has a great potential. So look at him go, James Cameron, one medium at a time. I think the Way of Water soundtrack, Simon Franklin's going to take over the charts as well. I love the music so far of Way of Water, for sure.
Oh yeah, like we haven't even heard a lot. We've only really heard that bit from the teaser, but it's so beautiful. So if that's what we get from just the teaser, who knows? Like the trailer music is going to be incredible. I can just imagine.
Oh, Sean, the trailer, I could I can tell you right now, when Jerry and Drew, which by the way, folks, Exploring Pandora, another one of our sister podcasts, Discovering Pandora and Avatar sequels have started one. They just did episode 1 not long ago. They talked about this impending trailer. Sean, I'm not ready for it. I I'm not ready. I mean, how are you feeling about the fact that any day now, I guess we could wake up and see a new glimpse of, I don't know, that reef battle which we've heard about, which is, it's out there. It's not a spoiler. It's there's a glimpse of it in this in the trailer that we've seen, the first trailer. But how you what's going to happen? You're going to call the day off work? What's the plan there for you?
Ah, it's really tough because every day, yeah, like I'm sort of on high alert for any moment that drops. But it's made me more excited because my podcast wasn't around when the first teaser dropped, so I didn't have that same build up. I was excited for it because I knew I wanted to do the podcast, but I hadn't got everything set up in place to get it going yet. But now I'm at a stage where I'm like, as soon as this trailer drops, I'm gonna have to just jump in as quick as I can because I want to I want to talk about it because there's gonna be so much to discuss, I imagine. And what I want to ask you something. What do you think? What moment do you want to see in the trailer? Is there something you hope, like a character you want to see a little bit more of in the trailer?
Well, if they really want to blow people away, and going off of the reception of just the artwork when we posted it, I think a bunch of us posted it um, for the art of the Way of Water, seeing Loak and Payakan, a breach, Free Willy style. Imagine ending, I just got body wide goosebumps when I thought of that. Imagine ending the trailer on that gigantic creature, like arcing out into the sky and coming crashing down. It's such a striking image, and I totally understand why they chose it for the art of book. So if they could include that shot, I think I'd have to maybe take the whole rest of the day off work. I'd have to figure it out because I don't think I'd be able to sort of deal with life at that point. It would be too much excitement. I now I have to ask you the same. What would you like to see?
I it's really tough. I really want to see more for Spider, and I think that's Jack Champion. I'm so excited for that character and how, because to me, when I was sort of thinking about like what are we going to see in this movie before we had anything sort of revealed about it, I wasn't expecting that they'd have like a human adopted child, and I think that's such an interesting concept, and it makes so much sense that Jake would still have that sort of like desire to be, it's almost a way for him to keep a bit of his humanity by having an adopted child. I think that's a fact that plays into it.
I had not thought of that, and that's definitely adds pathos to it. And I think maybe Spider, I almost called him Jack. Spider will probably um, have a scene of. It seems like they're going to have some kind of dialogue of like, I'm not like them, Dad. I don't look like the others. That's you know a bit a lovely, almost something out of a fable. Of or even I think Mulan also had that. It's like the late blossom, stands out from the rest. And I think there's going to have to be some conversations between a father and adopted son saying, you might not be 9 foot tall and you might not have a Q, but you are absolutely one of us. And I won't have anyone say that you're anything but one of the people. And dealing with a little bit of that, gatekeeping and prejudices, which, that's going to have made this young boy very tough, out there, potentially unprecedented. Like he may even be. That's why I think he evokes Tarzan deliberately.
Yeah.
With his acrobatic. And by the way, that's totally something Jack trained for. Like we're out here thinking of Payakans and Suraks and reef battles and Metkainas and Tonowaris and Ronals, but we have a bona fide Tarzan parkour performance ahead of us, and I'm cannot wait to see that. Yeah, I think he may have put overtime into that. Like he completely transformed from this young kid in those, World of Pandora promo shots. Like he's this skinny little kid, and now he's just this tank of a dude, like ready to take on whatever the sequels after this have to throw at him for sure.
Mm. And we did see, I think it was behind the scenes of him training with Arnold. So,
Oh yeah.
if you got Arnold training you, you're not going to be you're going to be putting in your full effort. I promise you.
Jack is cool. On Garrett's episode, we talked about the bond that they forged, and Garrett was very unfettered in saying like I consider him like one of my children for sure, and he is actually one of those one of the people from the production who chimed in on pretty early on the podcast with like a like. I think he liked one of our posts. The very first one was Zoe, actually, out of nowhere. Hasn't circled back to us since, but I take that as a sign that at some point she'll find her way to us and find her way to you again. Everyone I'll be speaking with is like, here's your next stops. You want to be talking to Shaun. You want to be going over to exploring Pandora because that's where it happens. I think I'll throw this to you actually with algorithm versus word of mouth. I'm sure Avatar will find success on both, but in in view of what we're talking about in terms of a return, to yeah, the sort of originating um, energies of creativity. Yeah, that's kind of what I get from Avatar and the tried and tested. This is James Cameron, who's like, I hear what people are saying, and I hear Avatar, that's almost become a trope now to say that it quote unquote isn't relevant anymore or whatever. Um, that's something he's just not concerned about. And he said, look, if people resonate with some of these things that are actually happening on an unconscious level, which is you look at IMDb, all the number ones are Planet Earth, Planet, David Attenborough. That's always number one because it speaks to something unconscious for humans where we have a yearning for nature and a yearning for the purity and innocence and instinctive uh just simple isness of nature. There's something we find comfort right there in nature, which Avatar is completely aligned with. Then you have the second prevailing feeling happening unconsciously for humans, which is a recognition that we could be doing more for the environment and more with aligning ourselves to indigenous ideals. And I was watching a TED talk about indigenous guardianship being something that needs to return and be promoted. And certainly what is happening now in Aotearoa, which I'm throwing all of the energy and strength of the Avatar podcast behind, is to get that actually happening, to have New Zealand renamed. Like I'm so unfettered about my support of that. Like, yeah, that's a colonial name, and the original name is Aotearoa. Sounds more badass anyway. So yeah. I'm in another word salad, Shaun. You can bring me back if you want.
No, honestly, hearing you talk about it, you're so passionate, and your energy is infectious in a way because you have so much positivity towards not only Avatar but the community and also everything it sort of encapsulates. This idea of togetherness, nature, the return to nature, and yeah, it's beautiful to see because that's I think what that is what you said as you said. Everyone is craving a little bit of that, and I think as well that you mentioned as well that sort of algorithm versus word of mouth, and I think Avatar beats the algorithm in that it never fit into the algorithm to begin with back in '09. It was almost purely based on word of mouth that it succeeded the way that it did, and I think the way of water is going to do the same again. I Something about James Cameron and his films doesn't fit into the algorithm, and I think that's as well the same for us as content creators, that we can look at that and be positive that, hey, look, we don't need to fit into the algorithm by pumping out content that maybe we don't think is the best quality, but we know it will just get some clicks. But we can put out the quality of content that we love to see and want to hear, and that will get audiences.
Very much so. Yeah, I'm. a number of months ago, maybe even a year ago, your Know Your Meme approached me while I was moderator for reddit.com/r/avatar, and I ended up answering an email for them for an interview. So it was a email interview type thing, and it's still out there. If you go keyword like the Avatar podcast, Reddit, and then Know Your Meme, you'll find it. And they talked about like how you guys kind of, I suppose, kept your hopes up and stayed positive throughout the years, the 13 years. It was 12 at the time, but 13 now of one film, keeping in mind that at least since 2012, there's been essentially a constant outpouring for things like, Star Wars, certainly a more accelerated pace for like Wizarding World as well. Lord of the Rings is picking up too, and certainly Game of Thrones. And but one film, and he's like, speak to that. And just to paraphrase quickly, I said, it has almost entirely to do with a sense of trust in what the first film truly was. It wasn't something where there was a fascination or a fad. I think a lot of reductivist rhetoric around Avatar was that it was a gimmick. The success was centered solely around a temporary fad related to 3D, and I think The Way of Water, especially with the early reception, by every indication, that trailer I think eclipsed some of the more recent Star Wars trailers by a significant margin, and I always find it so just quietly amusing. I try never to sort of rub in people's faces, but I find it interesting that you'll hear, some, and I love what they do overall. No worries, but just singling out this, I think IGN crew they were talking about, like who cares about Avatar, and it was just a gimmick and all that. And I like to think of them having to write these stories at the same time of saying this on their podcast. They have to write like, yeah, Avatar broke records. The excitement is off all kinds of measurement scales, and so just maybe, Sean, let's put this out there for anyone out there maybe struggling with cognitive dissonance around saying that it's not relevant and yet having it proven to them objectively that it is on so many levels: entertainment, relevancy of social issues and environmental issues. Like, it's potentially the most relevant series. I think let's put a good vibe out to them. No backhandedness. Like, genuinely, I want them to achieve peace with and alignment with the fact that, yeah, it's here, and looks like it's going to be coming out in December. And I think it's going to be a bit of a fun time for all of us, won't it, Sean?
Absolutely. And I think as well, you got to think of that. Not only is it this year, but we're getting one every 2 years afterwards as well for what's going to feel like quite a long time. And then people by the end of it, I don't think that argument is even going to be in the thought sphere at all, because how can you how I don't even think it'll be able to be talked about, the fact that Avatar was ever not culturally relevant. People were going to look back on it during this 13-year gap that we've had and think it was brewing to something, and look what it's helped us create in that time. That's my hope anyway.
Oh, definitely. And the way that I feel like that's all but assured, we always try to be humble towards things and never jinx things. But the way I feel is that is all but assured is from the amazing integration I've seen from, at least from what I've glimpsed. I'm here in my little Instagram island and looking out on these other wonderfully thriving communities. Reddit, um, Twitter, and TikTok. I just see a growing, swelling voice of interest, especially in young people. You know, and ties back to what I was saying earlier in the post about people are ready to feel good again. They're ready to shed that skin, of the past couple of years. And Quaritch is shedding his skin to cause some trouble, but I think spiritually and energetically, us, shedding a little bit of the past few years, especially with the pandemic and you know everything related to this era of Avatar will, for me, carry a hope of the cessation of war as well, with everything with Ukraine. And I don't feel it's naive of me to be idealistic in wanting people to come together over this film and receive its lessons and themes in the manner in which they're integrated and communicated. And and yeah, I think people are ready to feel good and just relax on a Metcana beach for a while. We don't have to get too crazy and jump across dimensions if that's your thing. No, no hate on that, but a beautiful reset button, I think, is going to happen from an art and entertainment point of view, and people being reminded of like, oh, so this is what happens when films really evolve. They're not just wanting to put out a brand; they want to, definitionally, undeniably, this isn't a perspective or something subjective. Like he has legitimately created brand new technology for this film. It's a legitimate technical evolution of filmmaking with the underwater, performance capture. And so from that point of view, he kind of commands audiences to check out what's next. It's more like a film, like this is what film can be kind of expo, but it's shaped like a film and certainly doesn't compromise on narrative. And you know the story, Sean, about how Titanic, all that romance stuff, the story of back in filming it to be about an actual story, all of that was a byproduct of him just wanting to go to the wreck. He just wanted to go. He asked the studio, I just, okay, I want to somehow find my way to see the real Titanic. And to fund that, he built a film. He built Jack and Rose around that scientific desire. And it wouldn't surprise me if the future films, I think very soon we're going to have, at least for one of these sequels, Sean, glasses less 3D. You know, um,
Mm,
he it seems like he wants to stick to that idea of every time you see an Avatar film, you're actually seeing filmmaking itself evolve.
man,
Hmm.
that's gonna be incredible to see, especially if considering it's only 2 years each time now. So that's
Yeah,
that's that's quite a challenge he set himself.
yeah,
But
definitely.
if anyone's gonna do it, it's James.
It's him, and when he came out not too long ago about saying everything, I feel pretty confident in everything I want to say as an artist. I can do it and say it within the world of Avatar. It was such a vote of confidence in this world he's creating, which, if I were to put it in a way, maybe that for those maybe more familiar with John Tolkien, so he was a professor most of his life, and he grew Arda and Middle Earth, you know, kind of on the side. It's still very in depth, but it was to the side of his for the most part of his life to his academic career, and only later did the books achieve that success where he was able to dedicate himself to the world building and finishing the books and stuff. But James, he's been in this sphere of having so much more resources. He's got all these writers. Imagine if John had that, resources to bring in people, where he could devote himself entirely to building out the world. And you never want to compare things, but that's how I see the level of fidelity to which he's going to go. I have it within arm's reach here in my studio, the survival guide, where you can see all the Latin names that he's come up with for all the different flora and fauna and everything. And the pseudo realistic, you can probably say, even he would say, that is we do the legwork scientifically so that this stuff registers for you on a suspension of disbelief level. But it's taking everything Tolkien did with that very in-depth detail world building, and then adding in all these amazing resources to fully carry that forward. And Jim's got many, many years ahead of him, and it's only going to translate to an even more detailed and immersive world. So when he says I can tell all of my stories within the world of Avatar, I think he's really looking at our own world and saying, look how many. I mean, you and I, Sean, we can start traveling tonight, and we will never see every corner of this world. Like, in many ways, planet Earth is enough. You don't need 50 million planets. And again, all love to people who like universes that have that many. But he's so excited about like showing us, Sean, are you ready? Navi polar bears, all right, Navi giraffes, like, or rather Pandoran different variations on all of our Earth fauna and flora. And oh, like, it's just that inherent quality itself of our own world expressing itself in this Trojan horse veneer of this fantasy planet. I cannot wait to see all these integrations that suddenly these museums and these cultural institutions saying, like, yeah, we had a massive influx of interest because of Avatar. Do you remember, Sean, in the 90s when people first saw Jurassic Park, how many people wanted to become paleontologists? Like, imagine how many people want to become marine biologists after this movie. Like, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, like that's an impact, and such a positive impact. If people were out there wanting to become marine biologists, wanting to learn to dive, wanting to get into conservation, because suddenly they're, you know, this planet that they see across the galaxy through Avatar, they're like, oh wait, this reminds me of home. This reminds me of Earth, of the creatures we already have here, and the creatures we need to protect and save, and yeah, the planet we need to look after. And I think if anything, that's if James Cameron's plan was to save the world through Avatar, he's given it a good shot, and I can't wait to see how much he's able to achieve with this series.
Beautifully expressed. And I want to triple back you up on that idea of art having the capacity to save the world and save lives. I don't think that it's far-fetched for a species that at the very core of who we are is storytelling. Like it defines us as much as flying defines birds and swimming defines fishes. Like it's so integral to us, and often what we have preached to us we won't respond to, but what we have told to us in a fantasy context, our walls melt away and suddenly we're receptive to that. So, and he said, like, if I had put out a movie just about the Amazon forest burning down, it would have been too confronting for people. They would have felt a lot of guilt and it wouldn't have done as well. But because I couch it within this Trojan horse fantasy kind of veneer, where your walls come down, and we can affect this change, and still still to this day, and I think for many many years, until the evolutionary makeup of the human race changes, but for many thousands more years to come, we will be storytelling creatures, and we always respond to stories. Look at any context where humans operate in, and Avatar has this sense of responsibility to it. It's great to see him integrate an awareness of what we need as a species with what we would definitely respond to as an audience. It's good to see that.
I just want to say a big thank you for you coming on to the podcast. Honestly, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Yeah, do you want to plug your podcast and obviously the whole network as well?
The Avatar podcast is available on Spotify and Apple and YouTube in video form. We are actually on the Topic Podcast Network aggregate channel. I found it a bit easier to kind of record in that place as the sort of main studio, and then send out the audio versions to the different feeds. That way, everybody wins, and it's kind of a meeting place, so that when you come over to the Topic Podcast, you might notice, hey, I love Avatar, but they just recorded an episode of the Matrix podcast, and let's talk about that, and which we just did like a few days ago. So so that can be a potentially nice meeting place if you have that kind of eclecticism to you. But I am too my blood is blue, if we're going to put it that way, or I guess Navi blood is also red. But yes, full blown Pandoran all the way with everything I'm kind of channeling across all of it. I kind of try to feed everything into Avatar because it's, as I mentioned earlier in the show, something that I believe is a Venn diagram of just everything worthwhile in art and entertainment. But yes, Avatar podcast on Instagram, Avatar show on Twitter, and avatarpod@gmail.com if you want to say hi. And come see Shaun on the Avatar podcast on an upcoming episode. We're going to have some fun after that trailer. We're going to lose all composure. You've been all composed and classy here, Mr. Interviewer Man, but when you jump on my show, there's going to be some swearing.
Oh, yeah, this is it. I have a very like calm and relaxed feeling. If
Yeah.
that trailer hits, the composure is entirely gone. It's turned
Oh
into
yes.
manic Sean energy, and I'll be frantically screaming.
We'll make an Aussie dock worker out of you yet with your with the excitement. No, thank you, mate, and a great pleasure speaking with you today.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone listening. Hope you all have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.